There doesn't really seem to be a day that goes by where there is not a thread on Spectrum about master modes. Somebody complaining about it, somebody not liking it, saying it's killed the game. Completely insane arguments. And I've started to think to myself, I want to do a video about this. I haven't done one in a while. So I've been kind of torturing myself and very attentively reading these and trying to compile, maybe make sense of the arguments and the complaints and decipher through the stupidity to kind of see what they're saying and what the complaints are. I think I've got a lot of it. I think I've nailed it here. So let's begin. The first and most common complaint that I see is speed. People talk about the speed, the FCM speed cap, and that it's not as good as it was before and all this stuff. Well, the speed that we had before, which was uncapped, you can still get that speed, just gotta go into nav mode, right? But that speed was not conducive to having a good dogfight. It wasn't conducive to having a good team fight. Maybe if you were a really good player, you could have a 1v1 if the other party consented to it and agreed to fight you without flying away. But really with that old speed, nothing got done. And the focus of this argument, the reason why this is happening, they perceive that something has been taken away from them. And players don't often like that. Even if it's for the betterment of the game, even if it's for the betterment of the player themselves, when they have something taken away, there is this very childish response to lash out without really understanding what was taken away or why. And this reminds me of, and I hate talking about it, but it reminds me of World of Warcraft when you had flying mounts. Flying mounts broke the overworld. Flying mounts, to a great degree, killed a lot of what made that game special. But people liked it because it was convenient. It let them get around and do things very quickly. And I think a big part of that also translates to master modes. That they're like, oh, well, I can't fly around at 1.5, ms anymore and zoom around and get my stuff done. They can. They just have to go in the nav mode. But they can't dogfight at that speed. And this is, I think, where the big hang-up is coming from these people, is they don't want to use the nav mode switch. But going on to nav mode, they don't like the shields going away. And this is, in my opinion, a very psychological thing for people, because this game right now is based entirely around your shields. As a matter of fact, everything is heavily skewed towards your shields. When your shields go down, you don't live very long. It doesn't matter how big your ship is. This is not a master modes issue. This is an issue with the game leaning too heavily on shields and not having armor, not having HP mean anything, and having the end state of a ship basically being exploding. So until we get more systems, I can definitely understand why people don't like that feeling of being vulnerable when they're in nav mode. But you have to understand the idea behind going into nav mode was to get players to commit to something and to make a choice. And I think Master Modes has failed at that. If you go into AC and you get into a dogfight there in a team fight, you will notice that everybody just think things are going bad, right? They pop noise, they enter nav, and they fly away. So the fight commitment part's just not happening. Even in the PU, I have never felt committed to a fight. I've never felt like I couldn't just leave anywhere. And the nav mode change was designed to try and counter that, and it simply hasn't. So when I see these complaints and I go, oh, well, I'm not flying fast enough. Well, you can fly fast enough if you go into nav mode, so you can get your chores done by going into nav mode. Followed up by, oh, well, if I go into nav mode, my shields are gone and I'm vulnerable. Well, you got to make a choice. Do you want to fly away and avoid the fight? Or do you want to commit with your shields, enter SCM speed, and have a battle? That's the whole purpose here. I don't see that going away. If you put the shields back to nav mode, I don't personally care. And the reason why I don't care is because, like I said before, it doesn't really stop anything. They're gone anyway. So this is a struggle that CIG is going to have to balance. This is something they're going to have to figure out. Because the current system, it's not really preventing what it wanted to prevent, and it's also annoying people. And that annoyance is, again, purely psychological. And that psychological annoyance comes from the fact that your armor and your HP, they're non-existent. They don't mean anything. And that's especially hurtful for bigger ships, which are very easy to hit. And you would think they'd have a lot of HP and would be very durable. You would be surprised, or maybe not, how quickly a C2 can die to a single Hornet with cannons when its shields are gone. Another one of the complaints I see is that Master Modes has somehow invalidated a lot of the other ships in the game. I don't see this one, but I hear it a lot. And a lot of times they point to the Hornet Mark II, which is overpowered. Even after the nerf, it's still overpowered. It's the best single-seat fighter in the game. But a lot of this is, again, this is a balance issue. This is not a Master Modes issue. And it just so happens that Master Modes came out with really bad balance for individual ships and ship weapons. And none of that's been touched on yet. But players don't care, because they're in the PU or in AC and they're playing, and all they see are Hornets. And it doesn't help that the Hornet is locked behind the pledge store, so it's, arguably quote-unquote pay to win. So players see that, and they go, well, this is the result of Master Modes. Master Modes has done this. No, it's the balance. But before Master Modes, we really didn't see a variety of ships, and arguably we see more ships now, even with the Hornet being overpowered. Before we ever saw the Gladius, the Arrow, we saw the bugged Hornet Mark I, maybe something else, I don't know, I doubt it, but we basically saw the same three ships. Now if you go into AC, you can see people competing with the Hornet, the Hawk, the Arrow, the Gladius. They're not as good as the Hornet Mark II, but you do see a lot more variety. You also see the bigger ships. So Master Modes has succeeded on the front of making more ships viable. But the imbalance you see with the favoritism towards the Hornet and cannons especially, that's balanced, that's not Master Modes. Another complaint that I see here that I'm looking at is skill has been reduced, that there are no more ace pilots. That I disagree with entirely. There is still a level of skill in Master Modes. It is not as high or esoteric as the old flight model. Now, it's still esoteric in its own way, and I could do an entire video about why players are struggling with Master Modes, and I will, but this is not the video for it. But it has a lot more accessibility. It's not all the way there yet, but a lot of that accessibility hurdle isn't necessarily because of Master Modes. It's because players have, by default, awful settings. The game just launches you with the worst settings in the game. So to even have a chance to fight, you've got to disable so many settings. And you have to enable so many hidden settings. And then you have to understand that you can't be bi-cording or tri-cording. You have to understand that you have to fight inside the pitch, not in the yaw of the 45. There's so much more different esoteric knowledge, but again, that is not a problem or a result of Master Modes. That's a new player experience problem. That's a intuitiveness problem. That's just a lot of problems with the game itself, not necessarily Master Modes. And those could be ironed out. But for a new player, or even an average player, to even have a chance, they have to get through that initial non-gameplay related hurdle, and then they get thrown into a fight with players who have already disabled or enabled certain abilities and functions, and then they get smoked. And they think, oh, well, the skill here is gone. Where's the skill? The skill's not gone. It's just different now. No, you're not going to see players 1v4ing, 1v5ing, 1v3ing even players anymore. But what you are going to see are orgs, good ones like, Shadow Moses, right? They specialize in single-seat fighters and being good at that. These are guys that will take on, 10, 15 people with just 5 of their own, and they'll do well because they've mastered working as a team. They focused on working as a team. And there's other orgs out there too, so don't think that just because I named one, I know others exist, right? But these types of orgs that specialize in that type of combat, they now have a chance to actually specialize in that combat. Whereas before, those types of orgs couldn't even get a team fight because, like I said, the fights would be scattered all out. So you've got these guys who could do very good. And you're going to tell me that skill is gone? Why? Because you can now shoot down a former ace pilot who has made the mistake of turning his career into YouTube streaming Star Citizen? That's ridiculous. Those players are still good. They just can't do what they used to do. Is that the kind of game that people want to play? Do you want to play a game where guys who know life the game have this in and out knowledge that they can destroy 5, 10, 15 noobs all on their own? Do you think that makes for a good game? Come on. It absolutely doesn't. What those types of players now are doing is shifting towards the team play role, the cohesion role. And that's what Master Modes has allowed them to do. And that front is still failing. That front's failing because the UI sucks. That front's failing because the game just has numerous issues that inhibit team play and make it very difficult. But it's there now. And there's a whole new realm of possibility that we didn't have before. So yes, is the game on an individual level easier? Absolutely. Is it brain dead, stupid mobile phone easy? Absolutely not. I've also found it very strange that players would brag or hold individual pilot skill in very high regard in Star Citizen when the game is mostly populated by space dads, casuals, or people just kind of checking in on it here and out. It's never been something that I felt was a great flex, right? You go into the PU, you stomp on people, you're going to stomp on them not even with Master Modes, you're just not going to stomp on them as hard as you used to. But to place a lot of your value and self-worth in the old flight model or even the current flight model for a 1v1 basis in a game that's supposed to be an MMO, again, very strange to me, not my cup of tea. Also, the game has built-in auto-aim. Let's be real here, guys. If people hate bullet magnetism and auto-aim in games like Halo or Call of Duty or shooter games with controller aim assist, why does it get a pass in Star Citizen? Because you're in a friggin' spaceship? Come on, get real. It's an ego check, and Master Modes has been an ego check for a lot of people. And those people are certainly who have gotten their egos checked, and you probably know who I'm talking about. They've taken to the forums, they've mobilized their brigade of sycophants to go on there and cry and repeat the same talking points. But it's not going to change anything. And that's why the subject of this video is, stop crying about Master Modes. Learn to deal with it. The system is not perfect, but it's going to get better. It's going to improve. What you have now is not at all the final form. And it definitely is, again, like I said, lacking. But the only thing that you can do right now is accept that this is what you have. And you can either not play, which I prefer that you do play, but you can either not play, or you can go in there and you can challenge yourself. You can go into Arena Commander and you can fight players who are good. And you can take your lumps. Now, you go in there and you take your beating, and you come out and you're going to tell me there's no skill? You're going to go in there and face down one or two good players who are dominating the scoreboard because they're working together as a team, and you're going to tell me that there's no skill? That's absolutely nonsense. But you do owe it to yourself, because going on the spectrum and complaining and thinking that the system is going to be reverted after all the time and effort has been put into it is preposterous. It's simply not going to happen. And in closing, I would also like to point out that I think the majority of the player base either doesn't care about Master Modes or is happy with it. You will see a vocal minority of players using social media platforms like Spectrum or Reddit or whatever it may be to complain. Of course they're going to complain. Happy customers don't complain. Angry customers complain. And these people, I think they probably represent a very small portion of the user base. I mean, you guys listening here, how many of you actually read Spectrum for anything other than amusement or curiosity? It's like going to the zoo, right? Because you look at the people there, and it's the strangest collection of idiots I've ever seen. These people are so out of touch with reality, gaming, Star Citizen, their own lives. And when you look at it, you should just look at it as a cautionary tale of this is what you can become if you're like these people. And that should be enough of a warning not to go there. The Spectrum, it's very, very appropriately named. And it's a bit like looking into the abyss. And you know what they say about looking into the abyss. So, that's my rant video. I really like Master Modes. I think you guys should get some more practice in and understand that it's very work in progress. And any of the complaining and whining and crying you see on Spectrum, that doesn't represent the majority of us. And if you don't like the system, that's fine. But I'm telling you, it's not going to change very much. It's not going to revert. You're never going to get back your old flight model. You have to understand and learn the system now. It's a clean slate, and this is the best time to do it. So stop crying, get into AC, and learn to play.